Hello and welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 29. My name is Lee. I am in Western Australia. I'm joined, of course, by Vikas in Canberra.
Canberra.
I know. I just thought I'd do it differently. To show my disdain towards the federal government, because we're going to be talking about secession, damn it. We're going to be talking about people breaking away and doing their own thing this week. The Catalan region of Spain has...
Catalonia.
Yeah, of course, yeah, Catalonia. The Catalan people in Catalonia, in Spain, decided to stick it to the man, to tell him to get stuffed. And the man said, no, you get stuffed. And they've gone in there with riot cops and truncheons, and they've broken up ballot boxes and all sorts of stuff. So we're going to be talking sort of about that issue, and maybe talk about sort of WA secession and maybe the Confederacy and libertarianism, because libertarians really like secession generally.
Yep. Well, to the individual's the sovereign, right?
Yeah. So let's start off with that. So let's talk about what's the libertarian, for those who aren't aware what it is, which is probably no one, but just for the sake of anybody, for posterity who doesn't understand libertarian thought about secessionism, let's just quickly go into that, and then we'll talk about some of the specifics of this.
All right. So I guess starting off with J.S. Mill's to the individual, the sovereign. So where the Hobbesian view of the world is basically that people are innately evil. Well, not evil, but like selfish, greedy, petty, I guess you could say, and that you need the government there to sort of temper, because people aren't angels, you need the government to temper them. The opposing view to that, which is the libertarian sort of view, is that effectively we are social creatures that have our own innate individuality, right? Or rather, we have our own innate sovereignty, and we must deal with each other to form a society. So it's a sort of a bottom-up view of the world as opposed to a top-down view. And libertarians prefer most of the power to rest with the individual. That's not to say, and I know a lot of people strawman libertarians for this, is that libertarians believe in rugged individualism. Rugged individualism is a concept. You can Wikipedia that up. It means you believe only the individual matters. And it's basically a way to justify being incredibly selfish. Yeah. Libertarians aren't rugged individualists. Some libertarians can be rugged individualists as well. But the general preference of libertarians is that as much power as possible be conferred to the individual.
Yeah, so there's the term called methodological individualism. That is, the smallest unit is the individual, and from that everything else kind of builds upon it. Where I guess the more collectivist kind of view is that the smallest unit might be the family, or it might be the town, or it might be it's something bigger than the individual, and the individual doesn't necessarily get to do their own thing. I think what you talked about Hobbes, so it's sort of Locke and Hobbes are kind of the competing views. Like Locke is another one who sort of had a similar, a competing theory at the same time. So Hobbes said life outside in nature is sort of nasty, brutish, and short. And as you said, the government's going to come in and civilize and keep things on the road. And really that Hobbesian view still kind of reigns when we talk about secessionism. Like when you talk about can a group of people say to the reigning government, no, actually we don't want to do this, we want to do our own thing. People respond in kind of a Hobbesian sort of fashion, like, you just can't do that, like, you can't break away. Imagine the chaos if everybody just did their own thing, because their view is like you sort of need the governments as they are to kind of stop people from, I don't know, descending into savages. Where for us, we will say, well, yes, but the group doesn't necessarily always know what's best for the individual. And so from the individual's perspective, I always have a right to say, this is my property, this is what I want to do with my property, and you need a compelling reason to interfere with my property. I mean, that's the Lockean kind of view, where property is kind of sovereign in that sense. And that
I would actually go further.
Government is derives itself from the individuals giving their consent to the government to sort of resolve differences. It's like for Locke, government is a system of kind of it's consensual. And therefore...
He said government by consent is important.
Yeah.
He didn't say that you necessarily have consent when government gets involved. Now, here's the thing. I'm actually going to stray a little bit and go a little bit Rothbardian here and say, it's not just the Hobbesian and Lockean view of things.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right? Yeah. But also, I actually fundamentally disagree with a lot of the tenets of Hobbes. And there are a lot of things I disagree with Locke as well. We can get into that in another episode.
Yeah.
But the point is, there's this, and I think it's a straw man constructed by people of the Hobbesian view that libertarians only care about property and they kind of don't have any plans as to how society would eventuate from without property. And the answer to that is we actually do. It is not true that libertarians believe simply that magic happens.
Yeah.
Right? We actually have very good explanations as for how things happen. Language, for example, occurs because of spontaneous order.
Yep.
Right? There is an imperative between two people, right, that they need to be able to understand each other, that they need common linguistics. Right? And that's why you see, no matter where in the world you go, right, there is always going to be a language of trade.
Yep.
Right? Now, currently, the language of trade is English.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody who's trading speaks English. Right? But in the past, it's been French. In the past, before that, it was Latin or Chinese. It's always been the case that there has been a language of trade.
Yep.
Similarly, right, the idea of there being a complete lawless, savage wasteland without government, I sit there and question. I always sit there and go like, hang on, societies predate governments. Governments come in after society has been created.
Yes.
And it comes about as a natural consequence of people trying to figure out how to order the society that they've built. Yeah. Every government has been a response to ordering, right? And it's a brute force approach. It's always the first thing you will come up with when you've got a collection of people. And you can do this experiment. Sociologists have been doing this experiment for a while. The first thing that happens when you get a group of people to come in is they find a way to gravitate towards natural leaders, right? And there's always going to be more than one in a group, right? And then they have to find a way for those personalities to effectively lead the group. And it happens everywhere, and it happens every time they do this experiment. And if you look at any society that's built up, it's the same thing that happens. We tend towards oligarchies, and then oligarchies tend towards governments. That's just the natural. Well, it's not the natural way of things. That's just the natural first step that we take. Now, it's not necessarily going to entail that every aspect of the government then from there has to lead from that. We've just elected in some cases to stay consistent with that approach.
Yeah. So just to sort of go back to Locke, I mean, so yeah, obviously you sort of talked about consent. I mean, one of the arguments that kind of Locke's kind of created, and then really, I mean, you see in the Declaration of Independence in the US is like a big aspect of their rhetoric. In the first kind of part of it is of, can people withdraw their consent? And it comes into what you sort of said, like if society pre-exists government, then society can say, or individuals or groups of individuals can say, we withdraw our consent. The government has no right to come and tell us what to do. We're going to form a new government. And there's a line in the Declaration of Independence of, establishing new governments to preserve rights. And so in both the Declaration of Independence and the two treaties of government, they were justifying revolution. I mean, that's John Locke tried to kill the king, and after he tried to kill the king and failed, he came up with a justification for his actions. But I think, and that's not a view that a lot of people hold. I think they hold it in the abstract. Like, I think it's something that you say theoretically, yes, government should be by consent, but in reality, that's not how it works.
No, governments always hold their force by. Sorry, governments at least since the Weberian definition of states has existed.
Yeah.
The state is effectively the only body which has the legitimate use of force.
Yep.
In a territory, and therefore, states all by definition claim the monopoly on the legal use of force.
Yep.
That's just how they're defined.
Yeah, and in the end, in my view, it boils down to might makes right. They've got the guns, therefore they can dictate what the rules are. Now let's get into the sort of the Catalonian thing. So Catalonia is a separate region of the Catalan people. It's centered around Barcelona. Apparently, their economy is bigger than Portugal's. So it gives you an idea of sort of how wealthy they are. They had a government that wanted to break away. I mean, like a regional government that wanted to break away. They tried to set up a vote. The court said, no, you can't do that. They said, screw you, we're going to do it anyway. And then, the court started mandating to break up all the ballot, all the election and all the rest of it. So it's all been a bit of a shit show. Riot cops going in, hitting people who are sort of peacefully sitting around, trying to, vote. And it's just all a bit crazy.
So to be perfectly honest, it would be easier to allow the vote. But at the same time, this is the same situation as, I guess, WA is in, and I guess what the 13 colonies in the States were in way back in 1775, not 1776, because that's when the Declaration was made. But 1772. That's when they started this entire process, where they were trying to get the king to recognize effectively the parliaments of each of the 13 colonies. Now, when you don't give people the political means to resolve their dispute with the central government, eventually they're going to have to turn to a revolution, because you've just said there are no legal avenues for what you want to try and do, so you're going to have to try an illegal avenue. Now, the issue as far as...
Just quickly, sorry to interrupt, but like this whole notion of kind of legality and illegality is such a weird thing. So they want to do this thing. So I guess this also kind of enters into...
It's about process. It's about process more than anything else.
Yeah, but
right?
I mean, I guess
it's about a soft handover. It's about a soft handover of that legitimate use of force.
Sure.
Right. You can have peaceful handovers, and India's a good example of that.
Yeah.
Right. Or you can have a violent one.
Singapore, Norway. I think they seceded. So there's been lots of secession that's been peaceful. I guess it's a funny thing when people talk about this being illegal, because if you're coming from the Hayekian view of law, it's very much about kind of what people on the ground believe to be true.
Yep.
So this idea that essentially a foreign, let's just say a foreign government, it's technically not really a foreign government in a sense. They've been the Catalonians.
Well, actually, I would actually say
ruled for 400 years by the Spanish. So it's not like this is a new thing, but
but it's still foreign. I mean, the people of Catalan actually do believe themselves to be different from the Spaniards of Madrid.
Yeah. So
I think it was called Castile back in the day, but
so a foreign court coming in and saying you can't do this thing that your government wants to do.
Yeah.
And that's illegal. It's just a very unusual thing if you're from a libertarian perspective. If you're going from the individual always retains sovereignty, and therefore groups of individuals always retain sovereignty. So anyway, keep going. I interrupted you because it's this legal anyway, sorry, keep going.
No, it was a good sidebar, but the point is basically the way the Spanish government is behaving is what I would expect a government without any process to handle this to behave, right? So that they have no mechanism to basically say, no, hang on, we have to sit there and listen to you on your opinion on this topic, right? The fact that the fact that they are together has been already sown in their constitution. It is the law of the land, right?
Yeah.
There is no dissent, right? They have no mechanism to deal with that dissent. Now, Parliament is technically the right place to handle it in most constitutional democracies, right? And it's really a failure of their Parliament not to address it. Now, I don't know the Spanish system in its entirety, but more or less all functioning parliamentary democracies work the same way, right? They've got the Parliament's the one that writes the laws. Effectively, the legislators in this country need to come up with any process to sort of deal with this. And what they've opted for is to smash up the polls. Now, that's not actually going to achieve the political harmony that they want.
Yeah.
Now, speaking as to the... actually, I just realized there's a George Orwell book about Catalonia and its sort of politics.
Yeah.
Although it might be about 50 years.
The Spanish Civil War. So, from looking at some of the articles I've been looking at, there was a separate Catalan government in 1931. So we're talking, that's just before the Civil War. So yes, he probably would have talked about it.
Yeah. So maybe you should read Farewell to Catalonia.
Yeah.
Might be good reading. Coming back to the topic at hand, but you've got situations like the West Australia secession, right?
Yeah.
Which overwhelmingly the West Australians voted for.
Yeah.
But due to the way that our federation was formed, right? If you take a look at it, the one the British Commonwealth defers to as being representative of Australia is the federal Parliament of Australia. So when West Australia said we want to secede from the Parliament of Australia and we want to form our own country, the Brits don't really have a mechanism for that because they're like, well, we can't really do that because there's already a parliament that governs that territory, and it's the one that's sitting there. So it's a weird sort of deadlock where they can't really do anything about it, and simultaneously we don't have a way to deal with it because our constitution literally says our federation is indissoluble. So
well, and I guess I was going to bring that up because this whole idea of unions being indissoluble, which is a feature of WA secession, it's a feature of the Confederacy. I mean, that was essentially the justification for the
Well,
union.
actually, no, hang on. It's not a feature of the Confederacy, right? The United States had state nullification, right? And state nullification was used for 30 years before the... This is one thing. The one thing that I agree with the revisionists on with the Confederate States, like I am no fan of the Confederate Army, but one thing that they do have right is that state nullification was absolutely a thing prior to 1865, right? It definitely occurred, and the northern states used it all the time to prevent having to turn fleeing slaves back to the southern states.
Sure. So that's a separate thing, though, from leaving the Union. From what I understand, I mean, I'm not an expert on the American Civil War, but my understanding is that essentially the attitude of Lincoln and others was that the Union was indissoluble. That is, they could nullify all they like, but in the end they could not leave the Union.
Yeah,
and that was the justification for their, technically the Confederacy shot first, but the protracted military campaign was justified on the fact that you just couldn't leave.
Correct. Yeah, so the northern states fought to keep the Union together.
Yep.
Right, and the southern states fought for state rights. Yes, the state right being slavery. If you, I know I keep getting pinged up on that, but guys, if you are one of those people that say it's states' rights, what state right were they fighting for?
Yeah,
and that question is
property.
Keeping people as property.
Well,
now we can.
I was just going to bring up, because this gets into kind of reasoning, because that's something that Tim Andrews, who's been on the show before, he was sort of a bit skeptical, because a lot of libertarians are like, Catalan secessionism, great, do it, go ahead, like as a broad principle. And, that's, I think, what motivates a lot of the support for Confederacy. Certainly that's, when I've seen people defend it, they defend it as people should have the right to leave.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with that on basis, but at the same, I would share Tim's skepticism based on the fact that so the best example of this would be...
We should actually finish what his point was, that ethnic separatism is bad, broadly speaking. And he pointed to the Balkans and said that was a complete circus. Like, you don't want to go down that path of ethnically
cleansing territories.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I guess,
so
quite the same. I mean, obviously there's a...
Well, it could be. You never know.
But well, yeah, it could be. That's true. I mean, I guess maybe the Yugoslavia generally probably felt they were all pretty similar, but some of them obviously didn't. So,
so this has been a problem with a large number of secessions as well, particularly those that are ethnic based. Is that the ethnic cleansing does start a little bit after that? It's just like, hey, we formed our own government. Now let the ethnic cleansing begin because it's our government, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of sort of comes back to the same way with the Confederate States, right? The Confederate States were fighting over that noble aspiration of, hey, we should be self-governing. The self-governing part was, hey, we're going to form our own little tyrannical little country where people are property.
We want to keep people as property. We're not going to let you tell us what to do. So screw you guys.
Yeah. So it's almost for libertarians, it's kind of hilarious because it's just like, oh, have your individuality. What do you mean you don't believe? Sorry, what do you mean you believe people are property? That's not how it works. You can't steal someone's labor. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
Except the southern states would have disagreed with us.
Yeah.
Now, it's possible. I don't think that's actually the situation in Catalonia. At least I don't think it's likely. But like the
ethnic cleansing of the Spanish might be a bit of an unusual feature in modern Europe.
it would be. I mean, I can imagine it happening in the 1400s
Yeah, yeah.
when when Isabella and what's his name, the oh god, I can't remember his name, but the when the merging of the two kingdoms of Castile and Leon occurred,
Okay.
if you guys ever read Spanish history, and I encourage everyone to read this, because there is so much shit that happened in South America, right, as a result of Spanish politics, largely to do with the fact that the Portuguese were blocking them from effectively trading with the rest of Europe. And it all started with them just expanding like crazy and taking over their neighbors.
Right.
But definitely read it if you can. But the point is, I can understand back then in the 1400s, hey, maybe they might do a little bit of ethnic cleansing of the Spaniards. But I can't imagine it happening right now. But to that point, they don't have a mechanism for this. So I tend to err on the side of constitutions, right? Like, because I prefer soft handovers of power wherever possible. And I strongly urge any legislature that's dealing with this kind of problem, the best thing to do would probably be to entertain the idea as a legal process.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
That would be the smart thing to do, you'd think.
Yeah, I at least that's the way I deal with it. And but the downside is, as everyone will point out, hey, what's to stop Western Sydney from declaring itself its own country? And I would point out they need their Centrelink money from somewhere.
I'm just looking forward to the day that WA can secede and we can ethnically cleanse the Victorians, just because they've had it coming to them all these years. No, just kidding.
Actually, I would kick Victoria out of the union if it was possible.
It's coming from the guy from Canberra, so...
Hey, you don't operate without us. We're fine. No, but no, sorry, not Victoria. Tasmania. What am I talking?
Tasmania.
Yeah, I would excise Tasmania the fuck out of our union.
Yeah, I'd probably get rid of them before I get rid of Canberra.
Yeah.
So I mean, I agree with you. You know, I think the notion of just indissoluble unions is just stupid. Like, on its face, like, it's just intellectually just a dumb thing. Like, you can voluntarily enter an agreement, but you can't voluntarily exit. Like, that's just dumb.
Hang on. That's the entire basis of the social contract.
Well, yeah, that is the whole basis of the social contract. But the social contract is bullshit, so I have no problem with saying that it's dumb. Like,
hey, come on. Yeah, that's both of us agreeing. But like, at the same point, you're talking to people who constantly bring up the social contract as well, which is not only is it an indissoluble contract, it's not written and it's not fucking agreed to. Like, it's not something that's presented.
And only one party can change the terms anytime they like, and the others can just get stood on. And it's like, that's... Yeah, it's not... The social contract's not actually a contract. Like, and not even like... There's not a single point of contact between reality of what contracts are like and the social contract. But anyways, that's a separate issue. There is somebody who I think is on one of the ALS groups who actually understood Sans' stuff and picked me up on it last time I poo-pooed the social contract. So I don't want to get into too much. But like, so yes, I agree.
Should invite that guy on the show.
Mechanism. But if you don't, I'm actually okay with a hard exit. I'm okay with a less soft, exit. I'm okay with, Catalonian,
actually,
the Catalan people turning on the riot cops and, beating the shit out of them instead. Because... Actually... Oh, sorry.
I just realized there's a really good example of how you can use soft exits to your advantage. And the EU is a master of this. How many times have, like, not just Brexit, but other exit plans been voted on and won successfully, right? Only to have that country end up right back into the EU. Yeah. Right? Because if you have, like, a convoluted process, right, that
brings up the WA secession, because what happened was, so essentially there was a vote had in 1933, overwhelmingly yes, like it just crushed it. It was like twice as many votes for yes than no. So they take it to the British sort of Privy Council or whatever, because essentially the Constitution, the Australian Constitution, was enacted to the British Parliament. So like, okay, Brits, you change it so we can get out. And the Brits were like, no. And what happened at the same time is the referendum was actually the government changed from the pro-secession, whoever it was, to the anti-secession Labor government. And so they just played doggo. They just, like, didn't do anything about it. And it just kind of ended. And it's kind of, like, theoretically, There's still WA still voted to secede. I guess we could just declare independence anytime we like. But because
not really.
we didn't have this unilateral process, which is incidentally why I'm in favor of unilateral declarations. Like, I'm okay with people just going, actually, no, screw you guys. Like, we're done. Because
I actually think unilateral declarations would lead to a lot more. I want to say a lot more state involvement in in bringing territories back into line, particularly from a federalist perspective. Right? I would imagine a situation where unilateral declarations were possible would mean there'd be lots of federal bases of military forces sitting in every state.
To be perfectly honest, if that's true, then at least we understand the nature of the relationship between the states and Canberra. Then we know that it's a foreign occupying force, which is essentially what it is. Like, I mean, if you're using the thing is, like, if you have no soft exit, if you have no mechanism for leaving, that's the only option there is. It's unilateral.
Yes,
independence.
I agree. So, which is why I'm in favor of soft handovers.
Yeah, exactly. So, sure.
Long and complicated soft handovers.
Just to quickly, I mean, this is when we talked about gay marriage. We talked a lot in our shows about, like, what counts as legitimate, like what looks like a legitimate process. This referendum we're doing, or this survey is stupid as all hell. It's a waste of money. It's dumb. Parliament can vote on this, but people think it's legitimate, and therefore that's okay. So, yeah, soft exits, because it will seem legitimate to all parties, works. But when that's not an option, fuck all you guys, we're doing our own thing. Like, that's okay. I'm okay with that. And I'm actually, one day I'm going to write a book on anarchy and establishing independent private cities, and a big part of it's going to be basically about unilateral declarations of we're going to do our own thing. Because if a group of individuals or an individual wanted to leave the state, if they said, I don't want to be part of the West Australian state or the Australian state, the only option we have is to just go, we're not going to play by the rules. We're just going to do our own thing. And if you want to come and stop us, then we're going to shoot at you. I mean, for that reason, I don't know if it's feasible, because Australia's got a lot of guns. Western Australia's got a lot of guns. Individuals don't have a lot of guns. So, but
my plan is to basically head off to Mars and start Martian governments.
Yeah. I guess once we've got robots
going from
combat, it will work.
Sorry, what?
Once we've got drones and robots that can be used in combat, I think it's much more feasible. But anyway. My daydreams about me starting my own private cities, like a whole other topic.
But moving on from that...
moving on.
Death
robots and private cities.
To private cities, and I suppose private cities and space. Yeah. Australia's got its own space program.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I'm sitting here.
So dumb.
I found it hilarious because someone went like, even New Zealand has its own space program, and I went like, well, if New Zealand's got it, clearly we need.
Yeah, we're really.
I was just like, oh yeah, I hear Iceland has volcano insurance. We should all get volcano insurance.
Yeah. I mean, New Zealand doesn't have like a functioning military, but hey, they've got a space agency, so go figure.
I thought it was look. Part of me loves space, right? I was fat.
Who doesn't like space, really?
I know everyone. Yeah,
everyone likes space.
It's an infinite void, and it's up there.
It's less divisive than puppies and kittens. It's like everybody loves space.
Yeah, and because you can constantly see it every night, it's like, hey, look, space.
It's the final frontier.
Yeah, but why the fuck are we funding it? That's my question. Like, what are we hoping to get out of it? And some people have said, oh, we can have launch sites, and we just, people will pay us to launch satellites. And I sit there and go like, okay, but there's at least 4 places they already do that from, right?
In Australia.
Which already,
In Australia? Or
no, not in Australia. Around the world, right? There's at least 4 places they already do that from. And can we do it cheaper than them, right? Because they've already got them up. They've already got these things up. Right? Yep. And then the second thing is, even if we can, what's to stop them subsidizing it, because they built it all with public money to begin with, right? And this is the same thing. This is the same argument I have with people who go like, oh, we need to have a local solar. And I sit there going like, China has local solar. US has local solar. Canada has local solar. Most of Europe has local solar. Why are we getting in this let's all get on the solar chain, right? When we can just buy cheap shit from whoever's selling it.
Yep. Yes, I mean, this is. I mean, realistically, this is probably the kind of
This is
thought bubble. I mean, this is like high-speed rail, really. This is like,
Yeah.
Okay, politicians are bored. We need to have a press release. We want it to be cool. We want to have a nice splash. Let's go for high-speed rail. Oh, we've already done it. Okay, let's go for space. Like, I'm sure the proposed Australian space agencies have been numerous over the years because people like space. And we have, I mean, theoretically, like, if we had a private world where this wasn't all just government money, maybe Australia would be an okay place to, like, launch this stuff. We've got lots of high-skilled people. We've got lots of space where no one lives anywhere. So if a rocket blows up on a platform, it's not like anybody's going to be bothered. Bother
It's actually
kangaroos.
weather. It's weather that's the most important thing, and we actually have some of the best weather for launching rockets. We have a lot more open windows for it than most other places.
Yeah.
The issue that goes bad for us is remoteness.
Yep.
Right, and also the fact that you said we have all the skills. We have a highly technical skill base. We don't for that particular thing.
Sure.
Right.
I mean that could change, and probably population as well. Like, we don't have a huge population, and so the US has got 320 million people. Therefore, if 1% of that population is going to be inclined to become space engineers, that's a lot of people. 1% of the Australian population, not a very large number. So, it's I can understand why there isn't one, but like, it's just silly. I mean, so if you haven't seen it, somebody did a mock-up of what it should be
Australian
called.
Research and Space Agent. Sorry, Space something.
Exploration or something. I don't know.
Yeah. It was called ARS.
ARSE, which is just perfect. Couldn't do any better. So Australian Research and Space Exploration.
Well, it's probably more useful. I would say it's more useful than high-speed rail. And given that I come from Canberra,
that's a very low barrier to overcome. Like, that's
well, hang on.
It's not very hard to be more useful than high-speed rail.
To be fair, though, at least I would say high-speed rail, right, in terms of pie in the sky thinking an absolute waste of money, is slightly better than fucking light rail being stuck up in our cities, right? We spent billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, removing that shit from everywhere except Melbourne, because they're fucking hipsters and have like an obsession with trams.
Yeah.
Because one, it makes your road slow.
Yes.
Two, it doesn't actually save any time because they're fucking slow as shit. Yeah. Three, it doesn't transport anywhere near as many people, right, and lacks the flexibility of buses, right? We got rid of them for those three reasons. Now they're coming back and they're going like, we've solved the first one. It's now going to run in its own set of rails.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, so why wouldn't you just stick a train on there?
Yeah.
Because trains are expensive. Hang on. So you're saying you don't have enough people for a train, but you want independent train tracks.
Yeah. Yeah, so, sure. Well, I guess we're going to... Yes, that's true. Trams are dumber because they actually interfere with human life. High-speed rail's just an incredible waste of money that,
It's for a thought bubble, at least,
yeah. And they build it out in the middle of nowhere where nobody's really bothered. Like, you just... Yeah, so you're right. So, but that's still, like, the bottom of the barrel. Like, it's those two things, and then, like, probably a thin layer of scum, and then the actual, like, bottom of the barrel in terms of, like, dumb shit. So
like a space agency.
So that space agency... I don't know what would be above that in terms of really stupid wastes of money, but
Oh, well, like, here's the thing. I was going to say, if we built a giant pit, put $20 billion in there and started burning it, that'd be worse. But then I realized at least we would learn the flammability of our plastic at that stage.
And you'd be reducing the money supply, which is possibly a good thing. Maybe,
possibly. I don't know.
All right, maybe we should contemplate this another week of whether we should burn our money instead of what's the monetary impact of burning money instead of building stupid shit with it. All right, well that's it. Episode 29. Yes, 29. We'll be back again next week. If you have any comments,
believe so.
Yeah. If you have any comments, make sure to put them on our Facebook, YouTube.
Anywhere. Like, comment, subscribe.
Yep, that's it. That was what I was looking for. All right, thanks for joining us, everyone.
See you, everyone.